I'm going to call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call?
Mr. Ackerson, Mr. Allred,
Here.
Ms. Billman,
Here.
Mr. Fell, Mr. Fitch,
Here.
Mr. Hopkins, Mr. Weiskopf, Ms. Yu.
Here.
We do have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
The minutes of the October 24, 2019 regular Plan Commission meeting. Any motions in regards to the minutes? Do I
You want me to approve it?
I want you to move it.
Okay. I move that we approve the minutes of October 24th, 2019.
Second, motion by Ms. Billman. Mr. Weiskopf on a second. Are there any changes to the minutes? Well, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The minutes are approved. Are there any communications?
There are none.
Continued public hearings. We have Plan Case Number 2359T18, application by the zoning administrator to amend the zoning ordinance to change Article 2, Article 5, Article 6, and other relevant sections to facilitate solar energy system installation. That case is continued to the January 16th, 2020 meeting. Cases number 2018A03 and 2360M18, proposed annexation agreement between the city and Henry Merkelo, including rezoning County R5 manufactured home park to City R1 single-family residential for a 1.01 acre parcel at 2218 East University Avenue in Urbana. That case is continued to December 5th, 2019. Plan case 2383T19, application by the zoning administrator to amend the subdivision and land development ordinance and create the manual of practice. That case is continued to January 16th, 2020. All right, so we don't have any old business. We do have a new public hearing. So I will open Plan Case 2392 SU19, a request by Stowe Real Estate Holdings, LLC for special use permit to allow a medical clinic, a plasma collection facility at 907 North Lincoln Avenue.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Stowe Real Estate Holdings, LLC, has applied for a special use permit to allow plasma collection facility at 907 North Lincoln Avenue. Plasma collection facilities are not specifically listed in Table 5-1, Table of Uses in our zoning ordinance. They are most closely related to medical uses, which are allowed with a special use permit in the R5 medium-high density multiple family residential zoning district. The related request to rezone the property from R5 to B3 general business, which was what was advertised originally, was unnecessary for the proposed use and has been withdrawn. A little bit about the site. The site is approximately 2.6 acres and is located on the west side of Lincoln Avenue between Farallon Avenue and King Park. Nearby are two area hospitals, newer and older apartment buildings, many 1 and 2 family residences, and businesses along University and North Lincoln Avenue. Here you can see the site location along Lincoln Avenue and Fairview Avenue. A little bit of site history. From 1960s to 2011, the site was used as senior care facility. When the facility was first established, it was rezoned from single-family residential to multifamily residential. In 2012, the site was closed and was reportedly sold to be renovated as a care facility. The facility never reopened, and in 2017 was bought by the current owner with the intention of demolishing the vacant senior care center and selling the site to a developer. Stowe Group, the applicant, is a developer. They specialize in building plasma collection facilities. A little bit about the proposed use and site plan. The proposed, and I'm going to actually go through your exhibits very fast. You can see the surrounding the the location, there's King Park to the north, and you've got apartment buildings at the corner of Lincoln and Fairview and single-family homes pretty solidly on the east and the west of the site. Our current existing zoning is R5 for the subject parcel and CRE and R2 zoning surrounding. For future land use, as designated in our 2005 comprehensive plan, it's community business. Community business, there's a little bit of discussion later on, but is described in the memorandum under the existing zoning. And then we have a thorough application and also a couple of examples that the applicant has submitted. All of that was in the application that was sent over. The proposed use of the site, right here you can see that we have a overlay in GIS. We were able to put the site plan into it, so you can kind of see that the proposed access drives line up with the existing access drives. Where the parking lot really is being proposed to be built, and then also the main facility. This site is proposed as a single-story, 11,000 square foot medical building. KED Plasma USA would be the tenant for Stowe Group. The facility will have 42 plasma donation beds, 25 to 30 staff at any one time, and 50 to 60 total staff. Stowe Group anticipates that, on average, 140 to 150 people would donate plasma per day. Many KED Plasma facilities are open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., so there would be roughly 12 people arriving per hour on average, with a maximum of 42 people donating at any one time. Delivery traffic will be minimal, with 1 plasma pickup per month and 1 delivery for medical supplies every 2 weeks. Pickups would be done using a full-size semi-trailer, while deliveries would be done in smaller trucks. In the staff memo in your packet, there's Exhibit E, which contains a preliminary site plan submitted by the applicant. In it, the existing driveways would remain for automobile access. The building's main entrance is on the east side of the building, close to Lincoln Avenue, with a path connecting the entrance to the sidewalk. Bike parking is near the southeast corner of the building and is connected to the sidewalk as well. The plan includes parking for 81 cars. Based on the proposed use, the zoning ordinance requires 1 car parking space per 250 square feet of building, which is one of the highest rates required for any use in Urbana. Based on the building size, 45 parking spaces are required. The applicant has stated they will have 25 to 30 employees and 140 to 150 people donating plasma per day. So staff feels that 81 parking spaces is excessive based on those numbers, and adding so much parking could be detrimental to the character of the neighborhood. The site plan shows that the building has a relatively small footprint on the overall 2.6 acre site, with parking and access drives around it covering roughly 1/3 of the site. The proposed development is similar to auto-oriented businesses located further north on Lincoln Avenue, along with University Avenue and along Cunningham Avenue, which all tend to be away from downtown and the University of Illinois campus and outside of neighborhoods. Given the location in a neighborhood relatively close to campus, a more compact site with less parking would be more appropriate. The proposed site is well served by transit, and while Lincoln Avenue is not the most pleasant street to walk or bike down in this particular area, the site is located in a neighborhood where it is fairly easy and comfortable for people to walk and bike. This makes it a convenient location for neighborhood serving businesses. While landscaping is not shown on the preliminary site plan, the final development, if approved, must conform to the landscaping and screening requirements of the Urbana zoning ordinance. Staff recommends that a landscape plan be submitted and adhered to as a condition of the special use permit. We did have a neighborhood meeting on November 13th, 2019 at the Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School. The meeting had 4 attendees. They asked questions about the size of the parking area, how many plasma facilities exist in the area, employment, how traffic would move to and from the site, and other general information about KED Plasma facilities Stowe Real Estate Holdings has developed. Now for the requirements for a special use permit. The first requirement, that the proposed use is conducive to the public convenience at that location. The property is along a major arterial road less than 2 miles from I-74 highway interchange, is about half a mile from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign campus, and within half a mile of the site, there are approximately 800 residences. The location is well served by transit, good bicycle infrastructure, and is within walking distance to Crystal Lake Park, the University of Illinois, downtown Urbana, and Carl Foundation and OSF hospital campuses. The property is in a prime location to serve many communities, but auto-oriented style development may make it more difficult for people to walk and bike to the proposed development. People who are not driving or taking transit to the site will likely have to cross grass and parking lots to get there. In addition, the proposed site makes no attempt to connect to King Park and its existing network of paths that could make it much more convenient to access the site from the north and the west. The applicant indicated to staff that they are interested in building a bus shelter or pad on Lincoln Avenue in front of the proposed building, and they have reached out to CUMTD to discuss that possibility. Staff feels that the use is generally conducive for the public convenience, but that the site plan could be amended to better connect to and fit in with the surrounding neighborhood. The comprehensive plan encourages shared parking, minimized access drives, and enhanced landscaping to ease the transition between intensity of land use. The second requirement, that the proposed use is designated, located, and proposed to be operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located, or otherwise injurious to the public welfare. The use is compatible with the size and traffic of Lincoln Avenue and is similar to other nearby medical and related uses. The future land use for the area is identified as community business, which calls for development that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and that is accessible to people walking, biking, and taking transit, in addition to those arriving by car. The site plan makes some accommodations for transit riders with an area identified for a potential bus shelter, and it places the building close to Lincoln Avenue to make it more accessible for people walking to the site. However, the plan does little else to connect the site to the surrounding neighborhood, and the parking lot dominates the majority of the site, which will do little to enhance the area. The commercial intensity of the proposed use may be minimal, with an anticipated 140 to 150 customers a day, or 12 customers per hour, and may be less disruptive to the neighboring residential area than other more intense commercial development of the site. However, the comprehensive plan identified the entire site for future business use, so in this case, less developed commercial area may be detrimental by limiting development possibilities that could better serve the neighborhood in the future. On the other hand, the site held a vacant building for many years and is now a vacant lot. Some development, like the current proposal, is likely less detrimental to the public than if the lot were to remain vacant. Staff feels that the location has commercial potential beyond the current proposal, which would limit the potential for future neighborhood-serving businesses on the site, as called for in the comprehensive plan. However, staff finds the proposal is not likely to be injurious or detrimental to the public welfare, as leaving the site vacant would likely be more harmful to the neighborhood. The third requirement, that the proposed use conforms to the applicable regulations and standards of, and preserves the essential character of, the district in which it shall be located, except where such regulations and standards are modified in Section 7(7). The R5 medium-high density multiple family residential zoning district is mainly designated to be residential in character. However, medical uses are allowed in the zone with a special use permit. The proposed site plan adheres to all development regulations in the R5 zoning district. Staff finds that the proposal generally conforms to regulations, standards, and characters of the R5 zoning district. The Plan Commission, and I'm going to go into a little bit of the options Plan Commission has for special use permits. Plan Commission shall determine whether the reasons set forth in the applications and evidence adduced during the public hearing justify the granting of a special use permit, and whether the proposed uses will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, and will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located, or otherwise injurious or detrimental to public welfare. In addition, the Plan Commission shall make a recommendation to City Council for or against the proposed special uses, and may also recommend such additional conditions and requirements on the operation of the proposed uses as are appropriate or necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare, and to carry out the purposes of this ordinance, including but not limited to conditions that, 1, regulate location, extent, and intensity of such uses, 2, require adherence to an approved site plan, 3, require landscaping and the screening of such use by means of fences, walls, or vegetation, 4, stipulate a required minimum lot size, minimum yards, and maximum height of buildings and structures, 5, regulate vehicular access and volume, and the design and location of parking and loading areas and structures, 6, require conformance to health, safety, and sanitation requirements as necessary, 7, regulate signs and outdoor lighting, 8, any other conditions deemed necessary to affect the purposes of the zoning ordinance. Since the Plan Commission can regulate the design and location of parking areas per number 5 above, staff recommends a condition that would limit the amount of parking that the applicant can build. Staff findings. Number 1, Stowe Group Real Estate Holding LLC requests a special use permit to establish a medical clinic at 907 North Lincoln Avenue in the R5 medium-high density multiple family residential. Number 2, the proposed use is generally conducive to the public convenience at this location, as it is located in an area with close proximity to the University of Illinois, I-74, and is on a high-traffic road. Number 3, the proposed use would not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located, as leaving the site vacant would likely be more harmful to the neighborhood. Number 4, the proposed use conforms to regulations and standards of and preserves the essential character of R5 medium-high density multiple family residential zoning district in which it shall be located, as it is allowed use in this district with the approval of a special use permit. Plan Commission has options. The following options for recommendations to City Council in this case: 2392-SU-19. 1, recommend approval of the special use permit with no conditions. 2, recommend approval with the special use permit with any conditions deemed appropriate or necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare, and to carry out the purposes of the zoning ordinance. Number 3, recommend denial of the special use permit. Staff recommendation: based on the evidence presented in the discussion above, and without the benefit of considering additional evidence that may be presented at the public hearing, staff recommends that the Plan Commission make a recommendation to City Council to approve the special use permit with the following condition: the applicant submits a landscape plan prior to issuance of any building permit to ensure that proposed landscaping and screening conforms to the City of Urbana zoning ordinance standards for screening and required landscape buffers. And number 2, the use generally conforms to the site plan submitted in the application, except that no more than 60 parking spaces be installed if, after 1 year of operation, Stowe Real Estate Holdings LLC believes that additional parking is needed. They may provide staff with appropriate documentation and request to install additional parking. Number 3, that the development shall be constructed in general conformance with the attached preliminary site plan and a approved landscape plan.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions for Ms. Wilcox? Any questions? Nope. Oh, Ms. Yu?
Yes. You mentioned that in the neighborhood meeting, the neighbors were having questions about job impact and some of the other things. Can you give a little bit more insight into that discussion?
Certainly, yeah. So there were only 4 people who showed up for the 2-hour open house neighborhood meeting. Dustin Allred was one of them. And I think the questions that were asked were just general questions about, how many people will be working there, traffic, transportation, what does Stowe Real Estate Holdings LLC do, what does KED Plasma do, why is plasma necessary, a necessary business. So those were the kinds of questions that they received.
So I will have the same question, why plasma collection facility would choose that location instead of any other location?
Is that a question for me, or is that for the applicants?
You can wait and talk to the applicants about that.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Any further questions? Mr. Allred?
So classifying this as a medical clinic, which is the use that's listed in the zoning ordinance as potential for a special use permit, is there precedence for this kind of thing? I'm just curious because in some ways this seems more like a business than it does a medical clinic. And I was wondering if there had been some discussion or if you've seen this done elsewhere in a similar fashion.
So that's a really interesting question. You generally, the rule of thumb is we try to find the closest use to that. The second thing, too, as well, is that for medical clinic, we don't really specify between would be like a business or what would be a nonprofit, a hospital or medical clinic. So it may be a for-profit clinic, but if it's a medical clinic or we don't specify in the zoning ordinance which one that would be.
Any further questions? Ms. Billman?
Do you know how many other plasma centers there are
Yeah,
in
there
town, in Champaign and Urbana?
there are two that I'm aware of in researching the case. One is in Champaign, the CSL Plasma. I think the other one is either in Champaign or in Urbana, but it's like very close to Wright Street. And it's over by OSF.
Anything further? Any further questions? All right. I guess, thank you. All right, now let me just briefly explain the procedures for a public hearing. We've heard from city staff, and now we will ask if the petitioner has anything they want to address the commission about. So you could come on forward. Following that, anyone in favor of this proposal will be allowed to address the commission. Following that, anyone opposed to this proposal can address the commission. And then, if necessary, the petitioners could have the last word. But, okay, gentlemen, if you could just introduce yourselves for the record.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, my name is Matt Deering. I'm an attorney with Meyer Capel Professional Corporation in Champaign. And I have with me my client, Scott Stow of Stow Development Group.
Yeah, Scott Stow, Stow Development Corporation. We're based out of Cincinnati. We're a third-generation family business. I'm also a partner on this project and chief operating officer for Stow Development Corporation.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's anything you want to, any kind of a statement you want to make, or if you just want to open yourselves for questions, it's up to you.
Well, just very quickly, if we might.
Sure.
And first of all, thank you to the staff. Thank you to Lily and Kevin for your thorough examination of our application and our conversations we've had in the meantime. Very much appreciate it. Appreciate everyone's time here this evening as well. We think, as you can see from the documents attached to the applications and the staff report, that Stow Development Group is a proven developer of high-quality properties, including plasma collection facilities. And I would add that they are very excited about this proposed property at 907 North Lincoln. For the most part, my client and I, we agree with the staff's analysis and findings and recommendations, but there are a couple of items, exceptions to that agreement, mainly related to the issues with parking that we'd like to address tonight. First of all, there was suggestion in the staff report, and again here tonight, that as shown on the preliminary site plan, there was no effort made to connect to the paths within King Park. I admit there's no specific attachment to King Park added. However, with this overlooks that with the building pushed up to Lincoln Avenue the way it is pushed up almost to the sidewalk that in itself connects to King Park and the pathways there. So the suggestion that walkers to the site would likely have to cross grass or parking lot doesn't seem realistic. I mean, it's the King park paths are connected by the sidewalk. The second issue is the idea that the amount of the parking itself would be detrimental to the character of the neighborhood. While I agree that even if it was detrimental, it is outweighed by the fact that some development there is better than none. But the idea that the parking in and of itself on this site would be detrimental, we think overlooks that even with the parking as it is shown with the 81 spaces, there's still plenty of open area, I don't know if it qualifies as green space, but unpaved space that would allow for plenty of appropriate landscaping. And I think Scott can confirm later that the intent would be to try to save and retain as many of the large mature trees that are there now that, you know, we would hope would retain some of the essential character of the neighborhood rather than act as a detriment. Further, and Scott could talk to this as well with some experience that he's had at another site, but lesser parking, we think it is almost a certainty that some overflow parking would be required, and that would likely spill out into the neighborhood streets. In this case, the most likely area would be Washer Drive along the north side of King Park, which we understand already experiences on weekends, you know, parking of cars outside of the neighborhood that come to use the park. So we think this is likely, if we don't have enough parking on the site, that's likely to exacerbate that problem. And then the idea that parking could be limited now and added later, while certainly technically that is true, we think it's a virtual certainty that more parking is going to be needed, and the idea of waiting to add it later is simply going to increase costs and efficiencies of the product already. So we would suggest it would make more sense to just put it in now. So from there, as I mentioned before, we essentially agree with staff's analysis with these couple exceptions and appreciate their work, and urge you to adopt the staff's recommendation to approve the special use permit, but after striking condition number 2 regarding the limitation on parking. So I'll stop there at this point, and then we would make ourselves available to any questions you might have.
Any questions for the attorney or the developer? Ms. Yu? Did you have one?
Yeah, so staff report has the calculation of the number of people who will be working there and number of visitors you're expecting every hour. So based on those calculations, 60 seems to be appropriate. If you are arguing for 81 is appropriate, on what basis would you be coming up with those numbers?
Sure. So I'll say a few things to that. While 25 employees might be working at any given time, typically phlebotomists are not there for the full 12-hour period of a day. So there is some turnover of employees. Usually about 15 employees will turn over. So while the shift change is happening, assuming everyone drives, there'd be about 40 people there. Another thing that I will add is, while, you know, if you think about 140 to 150 folks being there over the course of a day, they're not usually evenly spread out every hour. And a lot of times with plasma collection facilities, folks will come before or after work, so there's typically 1 or 2 rushes per day. And while there are 42 beds at this facility, a lot of times there will be some people waiting for beds to open up. And as Matt mentioned, we did a project with this same client in Gastonia, North Carolina, and which is just west of Charlotte. it was 4 half-acre lots that we developed on, and one of the lots had a deed restriction from the 1940s, and we were not available to develop that, and it was supposed to be one of the parking areas. And after they opened up, and over the next year or so, it became evident that folks were parking in side streets that were residential neighborhoods, and it did cause, folks in the neighborhood to, wonder why people were parking on adjacent streets. Since that has happened, we got the deed restriction removed on the last parcel and opened it up, and the neighborhood is happy, and everything is hunky-dory, for lack of a better term. So I worry, knowing the plasma industry as well as my client and these developments as I do, that might happen. And as Matt mentioned, there's that cul-de-sac just north of King Street, which is maybe a couple of 100 feet away from the proposed site at 907 North Lincoln. I believe Mr. Allred in our meeting mentioned at our public meeting last week, or one of the attendees, that that street does get used a lot for folks doing cookouts and enjoying the park, as they should. And I wouldn't want this business or anything to conflict by lack of parking or anything like that. So another thing I will mention, and Matt touched on with regard to cost, if we go below 61 parking space, if we're at 60 parking spaces, we're below a requirement that requires detention on the site. So if we were to go back a year later and add it, it would likely require us to tear up a lot of the parking lot in order to install drainage from the parking lot to a detention pond. So it would be very costly. So your consideration on this subject would be greatly appreciated to not only us as developers, but my client as well.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Allred?
So I think one of my concerns has to do with how this particular use works with the context of the surrounding existing development, which is a park to the north and then residential for the most part. And it's a small building on a relatively large parcel. When you add in the parking, it's a bigger footprint. But to me, the landscaping and screening will make a big difference in terms of the impact that this has, or how well it fits with the surrounding character. Do you have any sense of what would the landscaping or the screening be installed at the edge of the parking, or because there's a significant amount of space between where the parking ends currently versus where the lot line ends?
Sure.
Or is just curious if you had thoughts about that at this point.
Absolutely. So what I'll say about that is, before we even had our public meeting, we had a conversation with Lily and been very open about our plans for the facility. Originally, the building was going to be set back on the site with parking in front. Lily mentioned that in the comprehensive plan for zoning plan for the city of Urbana, that it would be preferable to be friendlier to pedestrian traffic and move the building up closer to the street. We were happy to accommodate that. We took it a step further and moved most of the parking except for one row to the south of the building, and pushed the building and the parking as far south as we could to allow for more green space along King Park there. To answer your question about landscaping, we want this to be as beautiful and welcoming to the community as I'm sure that you do. And obviously, one of the recommendations was to have a landscape plan prior to receiving our permit. We fully anticipate that the city of Urbana, the building department, and the community, as well as you fine folks, will feel that this is a beautifully landscaped property, and we have a reputation of doing a fairly high level of landscaping and making the property, as I mentioned, as welcoming as possible. So I'd be happy to show you examples of that. I don't know if it shows the landscaping as well in a few of the photos that I attached to the application, but as I mentioned, we plan on not only saving the existing trees that line North Lincoln. I believe there are some trees that are remnants from when the retirement community was there. I believe that was what it was. We plan on keeping those, as well as I believe I was on the site today. There are a couple of beautiful walnut trees towards the rear of the site, and we plan on planting a lot of trees, not only to blend in with the park, but to also keep it in keeping with the neighborhood overall. So,
Further questions? Ms. Billman?
Yeah, I see there's a 15-foot front yard setback, and I know Lily suggested putting it closer to the front. I'm just wondering, would it make sense, could you push it back a little ways? Make the setback a little greater?
oh, make it greater. We are happy to work with the city of Urbana and to push it as far front or back as possible. As I mentioned at the staff's request, we pushed the building as far up as we could based on the comprehensive zoning plan, but we are happy to move the building back if that is what you would like to see on the site.
Thank you.
Further questions? Mr. Allred?
Yeah, sorry, one more question.
Sure.
When I was at the meeting, you had mentioned something about there being some, you were trying to stay under some limit, and you mentioned it tonight, whereby you would have to provide on-site retention or detention for stormwater runoff. You're underneath that threshold, so you don't need to, but you have a lot of space. Would you be open to, or would you consider not just landscaping, but landscaping, that sort of functions as green infrastructure to address, since you are potentially adding a significant amount of parking, to manage stormwater on site a little more than if you didn't take that into consideration in terms of the landscaping plan. If you're following me, things like bioretention, rain gardens, that kind of stuff.
Sure. I'm familiar with bioretention as well as, boy, the name escapes me. They're stormwater purification boxes. I don't know that I have the exact term of art, but they're larger concrete structures that are buried that more or less allow runoff from oil spots that typically happen in a parking lot, as well as sediment before it enters the storm system for the city of Urbana or whichever jurisdiction. We have done them on former projects, and we'd be happy to look at that if it was required. And typically, if there is some sort of detention or water retention, these days with the Clean Water Act, in a lot of jurisdictions, they are required, so it wouldn't be something that would be out of the ordinary or what I'd call a deal killer.
Further questions? Mr. Hopkins?
So I've heard things and I'm slightly confused. With the 81 parking spaces, there is no requirement that they meet the detention ordinance? Is the...
That's what I thought
I
it was.
heard.
That's what I thought
But
I
if we
heard.
tell them that they can go above it, which they want to do, would they then be subject to the...
So we have talked to Public Works, who is the people who would make the determination for that, and they're still working out the numbers. They have not said that there would be underground stormwater, but they haven't confirmed
Okay,
with
but
81 spaces.
Do they need
With
to
the
change?
81, they need to actually submit a plan with respect to the Urbana detention ordinance, and with 60, they don't? That's what I'm hearing.
So
But I don't-
from my architect's understanding, and I'm no architect, from what I understand, I believe it's just over an acre of impervious area. So that would be the paved parking lot area. If you're under an acre, does not require on-site detention. If you are over, it does, and that's my understanding. Although I,
Okay, I mean, it makes sense, and I don't have the, I mean, I may have the ordinance
Sure.
in here, but I don't have
Dig it
the
out.
speed to get it out.
but that's my understanding.
Okay,
That, I believe, is correct.
because if they would be subject to that, then many of these questions actually are handled by a given process through
Yeah.
Public Works.
Clarify a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, so I can jump in here. So there's a couple things here. So the zoning ordinance requires that if you have more than 10,000 square feet of impervious area, that you have to have subsurface drainage, a subsurface drainage connection, and a stormwater management plan that's submitted. I do know that if you're redeveloping a site that's already been developed, I think Public Works only looks at the increment over what is existing there, and I think since most of the site is already pretty impervious, if I recall, we'd probably just be looking at whatever the increment is. So, as Scott is no architect, I am no stormwater engineer, so I can't give you those numbers. But we are looking into it, as Lily said.
And something that I will add, I mean, from my perspective, and I don't know if you agree or disagree with me, but, and I mentioned this to Mr. Allred in the public meeting last week, I don't think detention ponds are necessarily the prettiest thing in the world. They usually have to be fenced off to some degree. So depending on what it would do in terms of the amount of parking, obviously, if I could have it any way, I would not like to have a detention pond. It helps with cost as well as, I think, the overall beautification of the site, as I'll say, if that means anything to you. So,
Sure.
but if we are required, we're happy to submit a stormwater management plan and work with you guys to make sure that we're in compliance.
There are solutions other
Yeah,
than
right.
detention ponds, and I agree with you.
Yeah, this is a bad place for detention pond.
And
Sure.
I think we care about stormwater,
Absolutely.
but
We don't want kids
We're a
to
little
go
more
jump in a detention pond in this neighborhood.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
that was my point was that it would be great if you could try and handle that through landscaping interventions as opposed
Yeah,
to
that-
something else.
If it
And
comes to
and
that, yep.
We are absolutely happy to explore that and implement it.
Further questions? Okay, gentlemen, I think that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Does anyone else want to address the Plan Commission on this case? No? Okay. In that case, I'll close the public input portion of the case, and we'll discuss and possibly vote. So, discussion? I think we've heard the argument, I think, that on the parking issues, their experience suggests that they're going to need the number of parking spots that they asked for. So what is, and I know it's far above the requirement, but what is your thinking about the 60 versus the 81?
Yeah, so when we were taking in the application, we were trying to compare it to how the area is developing and how it currently exists. And the neighborhood's a very walkable, bikeable community surrounding the area. It's very close to parks, and it's also, you've got more and more of student housing, and you have student housing to the north at one north and one south. So it's really well connected with transit service. It's already very walkable and bikeable. And so when staff brought into this initial site plan, the largest concern that in those meetings that I heard, in the comments that I was getting feedback on, was, gee, that's going to be quite a different turn from the development pattern that we're starting to see kind of come out. So the idea of moving it closer to the street really kind of came back from matching kind of, as an example, like an Einstein Bagels kind of closer to the street. There is already that 15-foot buffer, so it's not on the street, but it would be a little bit closer, a little bit friendlier for pedestrian bike travel. And then the connection to a more pedestrian not car-oriented space, the park, and having that connection there. The second big thing that we got a lot of feedback on, I'm saying we planning staff, but myself, was also the desire to see a little bit more than just the single-use commercial building. And it was small for such a large site in such an urban, walkable area. We did talk to Stowe Real Estate LLC, and we talked to Scott and we talked to Matt, and they are not interested. It doesn't match their business model to have a second commercial use or to have a second commercial building. But it actually, when you break down those numbers for parking versus green space versus, it matches almost completely to, say, the Meyer in Urbana that hasn't developed its outlots yet. It also matches the Cracker Barrel. It matches other farther flung, more suburban areas. And so what we were trying to do is we were trying to match that up and reconcile it with the comprehensive plan. So that's.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Is you?
In your staff report, I hear a lot about potential use that could be brings more to the community, but this is not going to hurt the community. So I just want to open up that discussion as a plan commission. How do we feel?
You mean the alternative uses of this property? And is this the ideal use? Is that your question?
Yes, this one wouldn't hurt, but 2.6 acres is a lot of land for a 11,000 square foot collection facility. So as a plan commission, do we have any guidance on this type of discussion?
Sure. Anybody want to weigh in on that? Ms. Billen?
No one else has been interested in developing that area. I think if that were going to happen, people would have been asking about it, using it in that way already. I think it would be better, but I just don't see anybody offering to build that kind of businesses there.
Mr. Weisskopf?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I mean,
Is your mic on?
it's been on the market for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's just sat there. And it's been at, price per square foot for apartments, it's been very competitive. It's just the location
Yeah.
hasn't been able to support this idea of maybe something more productive than what we have here. And I think that the marketplace is kind of telling us that. So I would tend to agree with your conclusion or your observation on that.
Further discussion on that will be 2.6 acres. Is it a way for them to split it up and sell a lot to someone else? Just for fun to think about.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure that that's
Okay, no, I know.
a question before us tonight. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the market is what it is. It has sat there for a long time.
Okay.
I think that at some level, that's an appropriate piece of logic. And then you go back to the comprehensive plan and ask the question. But at the moment, the need for small, up close to the street, commercial, I don't think is the primary shortage in Urbana in particular, and even in Champaign. And as somebody who actually used to rent when you could rent, the demand for multifamily housing is less than what's under construction. So I think the idea that we might get multifamily housing, which we need to remember, that's what it's zoned for. It's actually not zoned for business at the moment. And I think we need to take that into account and be adaptive, shall we say. I think it's also, so two thoughts on the site plan, though I think the details of that go later. Since the stairs were blocked off here from the parking lot, I walked around to the front. And you know what? I don't like walking on 5-foot sidewalks that are right next to the street. And I don't like buildings as close to the street as your bagel is, even though I'm supposed to, given the field I'm from. And so I think we need to, be a little bit adaptable on this. And I'm not saying that I prefer parking in front. I don't. But the spacing, we need to think about what it's like to walk. You don't need to walk next to the street. You can walk next to the building. But, and given that it's close to Clark Park, it's possible to move the sidewalk. You also got a terrain problem that I don't have immediately in my head. Because it's on a hill, the sidewalk's got to go up. Anyway, and I'm assuming the engineer or architect has already figured that out, which is probably why it's there.
I mean, as I mentioned originally, we did have the building in the back with parking in front. I'm sure there's a middle ground.
Yeah, right. Anyway, so the second thing is that, as I understand it, there are 42 beds. Now, a developer or its tenant, and since they seem to have a locked-in tenant, the developer and tenant are pretty tightly connected. I'm trying to imagine, would I build 42 beds if I expected never to have 42 people there at the same time? I mean, I realize there's turnover and maybe you've only got 20 going at once because you're moving around. But I think the nature of this business is going to be, as was suggested, a peak loading business with turnover. And so I think we should let them build the parking they want and work hard to have a landscape plan and a character of the place that takes advantage of its site location to fit it as well as it can. I mean, we could even get pushy and talk about pervious pavement parking and other ways of dealing with stormwater and so forth. But that's for the landscape plan, and we're not going to do that
Right.
ourselves. So I'd be in favor of letting them build the parking.
Ms. Billen?
Yeah, I have no trouble with the parking, the size of the parking lot. I want to mention that because it's a university community, times are more likely, the busy times are more likely to be staggered than they are in a typical 8 to 5 community. But I feel good that my only real concern is landscaping. There's lots of space on this lot to do things a little bit differently. One of my ideas would be to set the building back. I can't tell how much room you have in the back of the lot. But I was going to just say to set it back 10 more feet. And that would still allow quite a bit. That or, well, I don't know how picky we can say anything here, but put a couple of trees in the parking lot. And I don't know how many of the existing trees can remain considering the size of the building and the parking lot.
Sure, I can answer that for you.
Okay.
So the trees along the front, I mentioned that we're going to keep the 2 walnut trees that are in the back of the site.
Could you come to the,
Yeah, sure.
you got to be on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, we're going to keep the trees that line the front of the site. I believe there are 2 walnut trees that are kept in the green space currently. There is one sycamore tree on the site. I told my architect to try and put it in, if you look at the potential future expansion dotted line and come to the left of that, there's a green space right there. That is where we plan on,
Which
He's
map?
looking at the,
The last one.
so I'm on our site plan here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right here is where I mentioned to my architect that it is a
Oh, yeah.
grand old sycamore tree and that we would like to keep it, although it is not identified on here. You know, not down to the foot, but that is where we plan on keeping that sycamore tree there, as long as it doesn't interfere with grading or, you know, possible stormwater management.
I'm impressed that you know your trees.
Hey.
I got a quick clarification. So that's difficult about the site plan is that it doesn't have the landscaping on it, but we do have requirements for shade trees that they will meet when they submit. So building permits don't get issued without having those shade trees in the parking lot.
I've complained about this before, it's the landscaping that's required is really minimal. And I'm thinking this guy cares more about it.
I like my
well,
landscape.
in fairness, there are other buildings have trees in the parking lot, that, at
Yeah,
least that they
yeah,
should.
almost, I mean, every one
And it
of
is
our
a requirement.
buildings, so.
Yeah.
In the parking lot? Or, I think
Yeah,
trees are required, but,
on islands,
Yeah.
Oh,
green
yeah.
islands in the parking lot.
okay, cool.
I don't know if I call them shade trees or not, but they're
Yeah, those are,
Young shade
yeah,
trees.
Charlie Brown shade trees.
those are ornamental. Okay.
Right, right. So, yeah, we have requirements in the ordinance, and, you know, so.
Well, that's not good enough for me. I
You
want more.
noted, it's been noted in the record. Yeah, but it's been, saving the trees is a good thing, yeah, that are there. Ms. Yu?
So I want to discuss with Plan Commissioner about the project that is in the same line, the retreat project. They have a larger setback, but those setbacks are not used for parking. So personally, when walking down or driving down, I feel pretty comfortable about that setup, where you have a development setback a little bit from the sidewalk. There's grass. I don't remember if they have tree right now or not, but personally, that space feels comfortable, and not seeing the parking in front and not seeing the building right pushed up to the sidewalk also makes me feel comfortable. So that would be something I would like to see. I don't know the setback for that one. I don't have the number.
It's 15 feet in the front.
For the gathered development?
No, retreat.
Oh, the retreat, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head. It's probably,
Is that the one at Lincoln and University?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, on
that's
the
15-ish
northwest
feet,
corner.
I think,
yeah, that's
Yeah.
at least 15 feet, yeah.
something like that.
And I do want to point out, if you look at the site plan, so it shows the 15-foot required setback, and then the building setback, this has a weird property line, so there's kind of a jog right in the middle.
Yeah.
But the building setback, at a minimum, at least another 12 feet to probably 17 or 18 feet. So you're looking at probably at least a 20 to 30-foot setback from the from the edge of the sidewalk.
What, I don't see how you get that.
So Lily, do you have the?
See the dotted line? I think he's talking about his building. and then
Yeah, so you can
There's an
see it.
interior walkway and then the building. So there's another, from that dotted line, there's another, I don't know how many feet.
Yeah, there's a building, then there's a walkway that's on the site. Then there's, from that main entrance, there's a walkway going out to the sidewalk. And then even further past the sidewalk is the street. So,
So kind of hard to read the text,
Yeah, do
but
you
we
wanna
have
s-
it pulled up here a little bit, and I can zoom in.
I can't read that.
It may well be okay. We can't really,
Yeah.
to read this, and we have no dimensions,
No.
and we have no scale, so.
Yeah.
right, you have to go by the 15-foot setback. So between the dot dash line, or however you call that, on the east side.
Yeah.
So that's the property line, which is,
So property line's right here.
Some of the sidewalk actually comes into the property by that.
yeah, and I think,
And that's because of the slope. That's what, I remember how the sidewalk looks like. It has to go up and back into the property because of the hill. The street itself does not follow, but the sidewalk does. So it actually is probably about right.
yeah, it's set back pretty nicely. And I do want to also mention, I know Scott mentioned it a couple of times, but the original site plan that they had presented to us did have the building set back a lot further. It was more of a, what you would think of as like a suburban style site plan. And I don't think we mentioned in our presentation that they did make a good effort to listen to our initial concerns and bring the building close to the sidewalk. So we do appreciate that.
Now, did the houses behind all face onto, what is that street?
Gregory?
Yeah, Gregory.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I thought. So and there'll be screening, I assume, standard fencing or something?
There's requirements
Yeah,
for
right,
landscape screening,
right.
yeah.
Well, it's good that the houses face the other way. So, all right, anything else? Any other comments? Jane's got it. But move it.
All right, I'm going to move it. I move that we approve Plan Case 2892.
Well, we recommend.
That we send to the City Council.
There you are.
Plan Case 2392-SU-19 to the City Council. What?
With the recommendation
With the
for approval.
recommendation for approval.
Now, what about the conditions that city staff recommended? I think we're okay with 1 and 3, but not 2, is what I think the discussion went, right? I think so, yes.
Including staff recommendations 1 and 2, 1 and 3?
1 and 3.
1 and 3.
Second.
Motion, Ms. Billman, second by Mr. Hopkins. Is that clear? Great.
That's very clear, yeah.
Any further discussion? In that case, could we have a roll call vote?
Okay. Mr. Weiskopf,
Yes.
Ms. Yu,
Yes.
Mr. Allred,
Yes.
Ms. Billman,
Yes.
Mr. Fitch,
Yes,
Mr. Hopkins.
Yes.
Okay.
my motion's approved. And do we have a date yet for council, or?
We do. That will go to a special committee of the whole session of City Council on December 2nd.
Okay, so 2
just,
weeks.
Yeah, just for a little background, at council's direction, we are trying out a new approach where certain cases will go to a committee of the whole meeting before they go to council proper.
Great. Okay, we don't have any new business. Audience participation, one last chance to participate with your plan commission. Do we have a staff report?
We do not.
Okay, great. We don't have a study session, therefore we're adjourned.